Up, everybody? Welcome to The Right Mindset. I'm your host, Thomas J. Bellezza, and today we are going to go over how I write my novels. This is going to be step one, brainstorming. So I'm going to show you basically how I brainstorm stories through the main plot concept, and then we'll take it from there, all right? So let's start the video and get the things going, right? Okay. No, hit the button. All right, like I said, today we are going to go over how I write my novels. This is step one. We are going to focus on the first step, which is brainstorming and how I lay out my concepts into main plot details. If subplots come up while I'm brainstorming, I let it go. There's nothing off the table when it comes to brainstorming. So I have my little sheet here, the 27 plot point short form outline. What's the difference real quick between this one and the other ones? Well, this is going to stick to like a sentence or a paragraph or a thought about a section, and just kind of like to fly through it so I can manipulate it and move around where I have to. Whereas the long form outline is usually dedicated to going into a greater detail, maybe kind of flushing out a plot point. And then I have my extended outline, which is where I do my scene work, where I kind of play out the scenes and make things make sense. I add multiple scenes, etc., etc., etc. I might even start figuring out the chapter beats in that moment before I go any further. I may even go back and add the chapter beats and my chapter breaks into the short form outline just so I can kind of see it. Again, if while I'm brainstorming, I come up with a chapter idea like, oh, I want my plot point, my first plot point to only be 2 chapters. I'll try to fit the story into that. However, I'm not beholden to the rule because it's brainstorming. All right. So, I don't have anything for a prologue right now because I'm doing this all off the top of my head. And we're going to try to see what we can come up with. So the way I do it is this is if I have zero idea and I'm just coming in and, someone's like, hey, do you have an idea? Can you come up with an idea? And I'll work on the actual idea to get it going. What do I have in here? Let's get, boop. All right, there we go. All right. So the first section of Act 1 is known as The Ordinary World, and some of the rules for this is the introduction, not only to the characters and the themes and the motivations, and sort of like the promise. What is the promise? The promise, again, is if we talk about dragons and they have never been seen, a dragon will be seen by the end of the story. If we talk about magic or a specific spell, that spell will come out into the story. If we talk about demons, demons will show up. So it's the promise that you're going to see what we talk about. The other thing is, besides the characters and the main plot, and the main themes and motivations, The Ordinary World does introduce the inciting incident to change that person's world, and then their fallout, or in this case, how do they react to that inciting incident? And to sum up, this is plot point 1, plot point 2, and plot point 3. Ordinary World before disruption. So even though this section is called The Ordinary World, this first plot point is the introduction. This is where we get to play along with the characters. We get to establish what they're capable of. Keep in mind, in section 1, this whole section, we can establish characters' potential. It's not until Act 2, the ascending rise to the midpoint conflict, that we actually challenge those particular capable presentations. Meaning, like, if we say they know how to use magic in the ordinary world, or Act One in general, you can show them using their magic in a way that's capable, and we learn that what they're able to do, what they are capable of doing. But in Act Two, the ascending rise to the midpoint conflict, that's really where we challenge their capability and see it in action. We see how they are capable, how because this is their proficiency. They know how to do whatever it is they know how to do. But anyway, so let's kind of like, let me think about what I want to do here as far as the story goes with the ordinary world before the disruption. Do I want to make it simple? Do I want to go into fantasy? Do I want to go sci-fi? Do I want to do a romance? Do I want to do a romance? I don't know. Let's think about that. Maybe we could do something. Maybe. Oh, I know. Let's do like a mystery noir thriller. All right. So the first part, my brain is thinking is, and we're gonna name the protagonist Richard. Whoa, that's not what I want. Richard is currently on the end of a case that he solves fairly easily, though it must be established that he had to be called in to help solve the case because the clues, information, and circumstances were odd and outside the purview of the original detective. What? On the case. Now, so even though I have this sentence right here, right, it doesn't mean that's going to be the only scene. It doesn't mean that's going to be the only chapter. It just means that I have to establish this plot point over the course of my first plot point. So my ordinary world will be that Richard is currently on the end of a case that he solves fairly easily, though it must be established that he had to be called in to help solve the case because the clues, etc., etc. Now, there's a couple ways you could do this with a screenplay. Not that this is a screenplay thing, but with a screenplay, this might be one or two scenes to establish it. The first scene might be Richard walking through a case. A crime scene. Whatever the deal is, and then some people busting his hump, and then the next scene is him solving the case, right? And by the way, the busting the hump is that, like, you're only brought in because of blah blah blah, and he's like, well, you guys couldn't figure it out, and they're like, well, this stuff was too weird for me. And that might be a film, but in a book, in a novel, you can let it breathe a little bit more. And that means, even though I have Richard is currently on the end of a case that he solves fairly easily, you can actually start at his home with the case files, or you could start in the office where he's working on it, and maybe the chief comes up and is like, how you doing with that case? And he could be like, well, so and so and so and so, they really they didn't bring anything to this. I'm trying to make sense of what they have, since a lot of the original circumstances have been wiped from the system, but I'm going to go check out the crime scene later today. I spent the whole weekend going over this case file. And then now chapter 2 could be the crime scene, right? And then maybe chapter 3 is him solving that crime. And there you go. You got 3 chapters. And those chapters might not be that long. The first chapter might be 1,500 words, maybe, and the second chapter might be, another 1,500 words. And then, so you get 4,500 words in 3 chapters, but it establishes this beat. And that's why I like novels. I love writing scripts, but with scripts, you have to kind of be quick with your beats, with your plot points. But with a novel, you can kind of let it breathe. So anyway, now I might want to brainstorm a couple things about Richard, right? Let's say he's old enough to have experience. Oh no, you know what? I'm gonna make this more of like he's 3 years in as a detective who handles odd cases because he's religious, um, likes weird concepts or situations, and studies oddities, right? So that might be something that's interesting, but he's only 3 years in. He is not an outcast, as one might think, because of his specific areas of interest. But he does see things differently than others, and sometimes that makes people uncomfortable. Their opinions are challenged. All right, now why am I writing some of this stuff? Well, to me, this is the plot point. This is what I need to establish, right? But I might actually indent these. Boop, boop. And the reason is because these are more like what I want to establish about him and maybe his relationships. I might even want to Richard A3 is 3 years in as a detective. Okay. I might want to also establish this Richard's partner. Someone he. Oh, no. You know, we could do this. Richard's partner is someone he went through training with, and their paths different ways. His friend stayed in patrol, but he is now higher rank than Richard. No, I don't think he could be because he stays in patrol. All right. His friend stayed in patrol, and then I might write this. His goal is to one day be a captain. Now, since that's like a note, I kind of like that as a note. I usually do that for my notes. So this is everything I want to establish. This feels like it all influences the main plot. And why did I bring up his partner? Because his partner, this is a subplot for the ex partner, but Richard's ex partner. So partner is and he are close, good friends, and his friend is usually on the crime scene, and Richard gets to them. The ex partner also has a nice network where they can get information. Now, if you notice, I wrote they, and the reason I wrote they is because I don't know if I want to make the ex partner a male or female. It doesn't really matter at this point. Um, I'm not interested in a love connection yet. However, in a noir, you want to have like the femme fatale, and then the dame. You got to get that dame, and then I don't know what that was, and then but also I want it to be a thriller mystery, right? So there you go. This is a pretty good first beat. All right. And we know that Richard is currently on the end of a case that he solves fairly quickly, though it must be established that he is called in to solve the case, information sections back. And these three elements should be introduced within the ordinary world, the introduction before the disruption. Other things that I probably would have to introduce, which would turn into plot points, but not main plots. But I would put them. I put them here anyway. Oh wait. Da-da-da. Boop. Yeah, I gotta remember because this thing. See how I have this header? Anything that has this black dot is a main plot, and then like this is me building on that main plot, and how that plot builds. So if I say, like if I do this ex partner um loves going to nudie bars. Right? I'm not gonna do that, but as an example, right? I have to establish that. So now I indent, and what are the things? He goes to the South Pole. Yeah. He goes to the South Pole, where there. Oh, see, now I have a he, but I could say they. Because why can't a woman go to the So they go. They go to the South Pole, where there is a good friend from college. All right, and remember they're young, because they're only Richard is 3 years as a detective. Um, how long do you have to be a patrol officer to become a detective? It says most police departments require officers to gain 4 or 5 years of experience and pass the exam. All right, so if it's 3 years, so it's 3 years. He's a detective, so let's just say he went the max amount. Let's say 5. So he's 8 years in. So how old you have to be to try and be a New York City cop? 21 years old. So what's 7 and 21? Wait, did I? No, it's 5, 6, 7, 8. What's 8 and 21? That's 29. So they're 20. At minimum, Richard is, let's say, 30. Okay. And the ex partner, let's say, is also 30. Who cares? Or we could do 29, because when you do, All right. So because we made Richard go in a little later. All right, so there you go. And by the way, that's doing a little bit of research. Obviously, I'll go deeper into it. So let's go. They go to the South Pole, where there is a good friend from college that they support. Right? I might make it. Now we could add that. Turns out they live together. And that's why the ex partner is always there to pick her up, and whatever the deal is. So now that's getting a little interesting, because maybe I'll keep that, because that's kind of funny, where they don't really like going to the nudie bar. It's just they go there because their friend is there and they have to pick them up, and it's sort of uh, protects them on their way out, which could lead to they end up being hired for. Oh wait, I'm sorry. There you go. For security, to handle the other people working there, the other ladies working there. All right. So anyway, all right. What started as a joke, as an example, I think I actually end up liking. It's misleading, and one thing leads to another. All right. So there you go. There's there's the whole thing. Now, what I might do, okay, is the the friend, right? The good friend, might be involved in the um, main plot line mystery. Okay. Now, I'm gonna change this from this because it's less a plot point, more of an idea or note. Put that there like that. There you go. So I'm not going to go too deep into expanding on it. I'm not going to expand on how the case is solved quickly. I'm not going to even expand on what the case is. I just know that a case needs to be solved quickly in the ordinary world, all right, in the introduction. And I know that I need to introduce the ex-partner, and that they have a relationship, a friendship, and that we have this other character who is a good friend of the ex-partner, which now everything we do has to affect everything we do in story. There has to be some sort of connection one way or another. Not that the good friend is directly involved in the mystery, but maybe they know somebody that is, or what have you, or they know something crazy's going on somewhere else, or whatever. What I want to do though with this is the inciting incident. I want this original case to be solved fairly easy, but I want the detective to identify that there's something else about the case that isn't necessarily related to that crime per se, but that there's something bigger going on. I want to establish that the original. What the? I want to establish that the original case is completely solved, but there is a detail within the case being solved that opens Richard's interest into exploring that detail. And then I could write a little bit more, right? Those details will open the door for a bigger case that involves a religious element and something historically um, old from uh, the Middle Ages or beyond. Ooh, all right. I might even say the religious element is that of an old goddess that is, you know, lost to the history pages. Right? Something like that. Okay. Or instead of it being about the gods per se, it could be. Let's see. Instead of it being about the gods, we can make the inciting incident. It is because the main character is religious and stuff like that. So we want to have the religious element in there because that's his expertise, and something historically old from the Middle Ages or beyond. The religious element could be the reason men and women are going missing for sacrifices that and I'm trying to figure out the mystery. It might end up being held by higher ups, elites, and a cabal. 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 There we go. All right. That's just me thinking it out. Now, again, this is all brainstorming off the top of my head. So, again, the first beat, the ordinary world, we have to establish who Richard is. I want him to kind of be on a case and solving it quickly. But also establishing who he is, how long he's been a detective. I need to establish his ex-partner, that they're friends, and that this good friend is there because that's going to lead to something later, And then we need to kind of push, change the environment. All right. Now, to change the environment a little bit, the captain, maybe the DA. The DA tells the captain to keep Richard away from that case. He's chasing ghosts, and there's nothing there in the first place. Okay, so why is that interesting? Maybe the DA is involved. What turns out to be true is that the DA's father or grandfather is involved with the cabal. All right? Cabal. And that's like more of a note. So I'm adding to the mystery so I know how to plant the seeds and bread it. Obviously, because it's a mystery noir thriller, I will have to, as I develop the story, go back and figure out how do I seed the story coming out. Because you can't just have the detective going through the story because then lots is happening, but nothing is happening. The goal, especially with a mystery, is as you develop the story, you go, oh, how do I connect these pieces and make them discoverable? And since this is the short form outline for me and brainstorming, I don't have to go into great detail with that. I can, but I don't have to. I'm just kind of like letting the story come off the top of my head as I work through it. And then, I can manipulate and play with it later. All right. With that said, so I have to establish that this case, so the real inciting incident probably would be the denial, like, hey, get off of this, So the captain is forced to give the detective, what in God's name? Sorry. Forced to give the detective another case that he will solve during this time, but it's not the case he's interested in. Which means he has to work on the interesting case on his own and personal time, huh? Because that, right? So now what does that mean? I want to establish that he needs to solve things, puzzles. He needs answers to things that don't add up. See how like I did that? So I went back to the plot point beforehand because that's the earliest one, and I added to make this have purpose or value. Now, if I ended up doing that in the reaction to the inciting incident, I might go back both and be like, I have to show it develop, because in storytelling, as a writer, our job to produce story is to actually let things breathe, to let details breathe. And an example of that is obviously, let's say Richard is an amazing shot with the gun. You don't really want to do that because it's not, again, it's not a screenplay. In a screenplay, you want to just kind of get it out there. But in a novel, we could play with it. Maybe he knows a little bit about guns. So, in ordinary world, maybe it's established like, I don't really like using my gun. But someone says something and he goes, and he knows like the name of the gun and like maybe the style of it, or hey, you shouldn't really use that bullet with it. So now we established that he knows something about guns. And then in the inciting incident, maybe, you know, he's, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but he stops somebody and he's able to like, you know, make the magazine full out of the gun to defend himself. And then, later on, maybe he takes action. Someone's getting away, but he doesn't want to shoot them, but he shoots the tire with precision. Like seeding that is the story, like letting that breathe and unfold. That little plot detail is more powerful extended through a story than it is to just go, let's see him shoot really well right in the beginning. He's an amazing shot, and now through the whole story he's always an amazing shot, or she's always an amazing shot. It's like, well, I think it's more interesting to see their expertise expand and breathe through the story, and be used for storytelling and not just this looks cool. Because personally, I feel this looks cool is stronger when it influences both the narrative plot and the narrative story. Because narrative is made up of both plot and story. Plot is what needs to happen. Story is how it happens. All right. With that said, now so the protagonist reacts to the inciting fallout. This right here, this is probably, which means he has to work on the kid. So this right here is going to end up being how he reacts to it. So I actually have to move that. And why is that the reaction? I'll tell you. Okay. The inciting incident changes the direction of the ordinary world. So in this situation, he's actually called. He's called in to solve a case that others are having trouble with, meaning they look to him as an expert. They trust him. They feel he is competent. They don't question him. All right. So that's being established already. People are working on the case and they just don't get it. And he comes in and he's able to solve it. The inciting incident that changes that is that he figures something out within that original case that leads to something other than the solved case that's interesting. And when he starts investigating and bringing up to people, he's stonewalled. He's blocked. There's things that are, and it's a little different than the ordinary world in a sense of he's not being trusted. He's actually saying he's being told not to trust his gut or his instincts. So that becomes the change to his ordinary world. How does he respond to that? Fine, because I'm a good cop and people trust me. I won't do it as a cop. I'll work on the case that I was given, which is this other case, to basically see right here. The captain is forced, and it's important that the captain is forced is in there because the captain doesn't want to do it, because the captain trusts the detective. The captain's into the detective, but the DA or whatever is basically the captain's boss. Or the DA could even be, you could maybe this is the mayor, whatever. It just anyone who has control over the captain and pushing whoop, pushing the detective back. So the detective's like, you know what? I won't ruffle any feathers. I'll work on the case that I was given, that the captain was forced to give me. But on my personal time, I will work on that. So which means which means Richard has to work on the interesting case on his own and personal time, right? He will work on the main case given to him. So he will take his time with it. So it becomes the distraction to what he is really doing. Okay? Distraction. Remember, all great spellers have amazing editors. Distract. Is it distraction? Distract. Distraction. Distraction. You know, come on. It's distraction. Yeah. All right. Okay. Boop. Distraction. Becomes a distraction. There we go. My bad. Okay. Anyway, so the reaction to the inciting incident for Detective Richard will be that he's like, all right, yeah, I'll work on this. Don't you worry. But on my personal time, I'm going to work on this other thing without anyone knowing, and to make it look like I'm not doing anything but what I was forced to do. I will take my time with that. And therefore, which means, this is the choice Richard makes, and personally shows that he is working on the forced case. So that's really what this beat will be. It'll be them accepting it, falling into that position. Maybe the scene will be, he's at his desk, or he's starting to interview people within the case. So some of the things that he is working on the case at his desk. The captain asks him about it. Richard knows things because he actually did the work. Richard interviews a few witnesses, etc., etc. All right. Hey, do you use any writing apps like Campfire or Screenwriter? Actually, the only app that I use is this one right here, which is you can't see it there, but it's called Quills. It's called Quillbot. I'll put the I'll put it on the screen for you. It's a pretty good. It's basically Grammarly, but it's basically Grammarly, and it's just I use it as a reference. I don't use it to edit my books per se, but I use it. It helps reference things, and it makes you think about a sentence a little different. It doesn't particularly tell you if you're using passive voice or active voice. It doesn't tell you if you're in the correct tense throughout the entire document. It doesn't do stuff like that, but it's a good guide to get your brain rethinking a sentence, especially if you think the sentence is great, but it turns out to be purple prose. It'll sort of say, hey, you got a lot going on there. Do you want to simplify it? Do you want, and you could work on it through that. As far as the program that I use to write, I just write in Google Docs. I use a lot of my templates to kind of get through it, a lot of my chapter building, and then when I'm ready to edit it, I do a soft edit myself for the first run, basically to make sure that I hit all my plots. I go through my outline and read through the book, and as I'm reading and I reach certain plot points, I'll mark it off in my outline. And then if I notice that I didn't mark off something in the outline when I'm done, I realize I have to go back and I got to put that in or clean it up. Then I'll let my alpha readers go. And, so my process is pretty straightforward. I don't really use like a writing program. I know there's some really great ones out there. And, I have nothing against them. I just haven't used them. So I hope that answered your question. By the way, for anyone that was Michael R. Asking, do you use any writing apps like Campfire or Scrivener? I don't know. Scrivener. I know what it is. There's actually someone who talks about that on the YouTube Book Talk and also the TikTok community of writers. All right, so back to the writing. So now I've reached the end of Act 1, Section 1, The Ordinary World. I got a lot of good plot point beats in there. I didn't really focus on a lot of subplots. To jump back to what Michael was saying about the thing, he's saying he's experimented with it, and I'm assuming both Campfire or Scream, or maybe the Scream Vienna that I was having trouble. And he says that it's the boss, so that's great. If anyone's out there who's a writer and who's looking for a good tool, maybe look into. I'll put it on the screen again so you can see it. SCRIVNER. Check it out. Let me know in the comments below if it ended up being something useful for you. All right. So I got The Ordinary World out. I got the beats, the plots. So we have to move into Act 1, Section 2. The problem disrupts the protagonist's life. Why would it disrupt it? I don't know. It happens. Okay. What does that mean, though? So again, we have 3 plot points we have to hit within this section. Those plot points is 4, 5, 6. Okay. This is going to be the protagonist reacts to and reflects on the long-term impacts of the inciting incident. Basically, it's a reaction. Whereas in this is, as you can see, it should be an introduction. Second point should be the inciting incident. And then this should be the fallout of that inciting incident, right? However, I can look at this and I can move this just by visualizing the reality of it. Maybe the inciting incident is the discovery of that element, and then the fallout is this. And I actually feel more comfortable with that. And that's the great part about doing this short form outline is as you're writing it, you can start moving things around that kind of fit the criteria for those beats. So what is, and I'll explain it to you right now. So if this is the inciting incident that changes the world, it's because he found a bit of information that pushed him into changing that ordinary world. He found information that is different. And then the fallout to that is that the DA is like, or the mayor, whoever it ends up being, is like, no, you can't do that. And the captain is forced to give the detective another case that he will solve during his time, but is not the case he's interested in. Which brings us to the long-term impact. How is he going to get around that? Well, he has to make the choice. So he makes the choice to work on the case that's interesting in his personal time, but he'll continue to work on the other case. All right. Now, we have to take action, right? I might actually add something to this, which means works in the interesting case. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna put this here for now. I think what would be more interesting is that he agrees, right? Okay, Richard. Oh my god, Richard. Oh my god, why can't I spell his name? Richard agrees to work on the case he's forced. While Richard looks into that case, he finds another clue to the interesting case, and he can't focus on that. So this means he speaks with his ex-partner. We bring that person back, right? Partner, about his situation. Partner, ex-partner, says that he has a responsibility to do his job. Whatever that means, it means to you, and you should follow your gut. Right. So that would be something that maybe gets the detective saying, you know what? I'm going to take the action, right, in the next part. So this here, and he works on again. Okay. All right. So then this is actually this. Oh, look at that. Sometimes stories, as we brainstorm, that's the great thing about being a writer. We're not always perfect, and the brainstorming allows us to kind of get it on the page and let us see it and read it. It's the same thing with dialogue. Your dialogue might sound awesome while you're writing it. Oh yeah, and then you read it out loud, or you get some of your friends together so you can listen to them read the dialogue together and go back and forth, and you realize, all right, I got to clean that up. And that's what this short form outline is doing. It's making it so I don't have to write a lot. I don't have to write out scenes or write out chapters. I don't have to do extended outline work. I don't have to do big scene work. I'm just letting little thoughts and ideas pop in. And as you can see, what I had in the inciting incident, I was able to allow it to breathe more and spread it out and go, wait a minute. Actually, the beats need to be spread out amongst those inciting and these other plot points. And now I'm on plot point 6. This is great, right? The other thing, though, is as I'm working on this, I could go back and I could start creating scenes if I want. But again, the short form outline isn't for that. For me, I like to kind of just get the thoughts out. If ideas pop, I'll let them pop out, and I'll kind of work like I did with the with this thing where I was like, oh, we'll make them go to nudie bars. But then it turns out they don't actually like going to nudie bars. They go in there because their friend works there and they're helping them out. And it turns out they live there. By the way, this right here would go into the inciting incident for the partner. Because, and I'll tell you why. The rule of the the rule of the introduction is that nothing can happen that will change the course or disrupt the course of their ordinary world. Any action that will cause a disruption or a change to the ordinary world goes into the inciting incident. With that said, though, that rule applies to protagonists and the side characters. However, a side character's change does not necessarily have to happen in the inciting incident. It just has to happen within or after it. Meaning, the ex-partner, that's why I had to take it out of the first plot point, because that changed their ordinary world. They were just going there. We were establishing they were going there to watch over their friend and pick up their friend, and it turns out they live together. I could make that technically happen in plot point 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. I just can't make it happen in plot point 1, because plot point 1 is all about the ordinary world. However, if I start off with the ex-partner is security at the nudie bar, that's fine, because there's no change in the status quo. But I want to establish that they go there as sort of like a switch, where like people are like, oh, they go walking into the nudie bar, and then it turns out, oh, they're really friendly with this person, and then like turns out, oh wait, no, they live together, and they're just there to pick them up and make sure they could get out there okay. And that to me is kind of like a funny twist on the impression that the reader might get, or the reading experience might bring the person through, because they're like, oh, it's just a normal cop going to a normal nudie bar. Oh, look, of course they come here all the time. Look, they know one of the dancers really well, and they're talking them up, and then it's like, okay, oh, they're walking home. Oh, they just went. Oh, they're not in a relationship though. They're just roommates. They're just friends. There's so much twisting and turning to what we would consider normal, like where it should go. Like in our brains, like, no, wouldn't they be together? Wait, they're friends. Like it's a nice twist. It's a nice way to kind of turn it. Anyway, all right. So, problem disrupts the ordinary world. The protagonist decides to take action. That just means that they're going to act on what it is they need to do. Let me take a little sip. Now, by the way, I've only been working on this for about 50 minutes, and I'm explaining things, and I'm going into great detail, for the audience to kind of understand what's going on through my brain process, why I'm moving things, etc. But in reality, a lot of times when I come up with a story concept, like let's say I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh, it'd be cool if X happens to Y and Z is the outcome. I'll open this template up and I'll just start working through it. and I'll just start trying to hit those beats until I start developing story out of it. A lot of times I might have a pre-story in my head where I have great detail, and then I try to fit those into the plot points. But the point being is I'm trying to show people how brainstorming and this short form template really helps fly through a story quickly and kind of get ideas out. And I mean, I'm doing this in real time off of a story that I'm making up off the top of my head. There was no pre-work on this. All right. So, what is the immediate consequence of the actions taken by the protagonist? Now, there's a couple of things I could do here. So, this is what I love about writing. There's so many choices, right? Like right now, like Michael's watching. If Michael took this outline and was like, "What is he going to do?" It's going to be different than what I do. But what's really awesome is, even if he took this, he will work on the main case. The way Michael or anyone else that's watching would write this would be completely different. The story version of how it comes out for them is always going to be different, but plot points are plot points. And that's why they say, a lot of things are happening, but nothing is happening. When a lot of things are happening, it's just plot. It's just things are happening. Story is how it happens. And it's really nice that it could always change. And when we look at the consequence of the detective, right, choosing to go behind the captain and the DA's back to work on the interesting case, there has to be a consequence. Now, let's say there are so many different variations. The one right off the top is that the captain figures it out that Richard is working on the case and they get in trouble for it, right? Maybe they get reprimanded, or they go, "Oh, one more strike and you're out." And now we create tension. That's a pretty common way to go. Another way is we can allow Richard to go through like a conscience kind of situation where they know what they are doing is wrong per se as being a cop and following the rules, but they know it's right. They know it's right to keep going and find out. That's another way we could go. That's more of an internal thing, right? or what can happen is they discover that the mayor or the DA is at a location where the detective is going to do a little reconnaissance into something that they found. Okay? Or because earlier we said right here that the DA is involved, but it turns out it's the father or grandfather that, and I like that. While the detective is following up with a clue, they discover a few people at an event where he doesn't know everyone who is there. Richard takes photos and Richard takes photos and notes from what people are saying as he uses the room, people, and his personality to make his way through the environment. There we go. All right. So this is pretty straightforward. And by the way, again, this could be a chapter. This could be 2, 3 chapters. It could be a couple of things. Honestly, this is probably a chapter's worth of information that I can make a chapter out of this, right? Because we want to see the event, but we also want the chapter would start off with the detective figures out the clue and decides to go follow up on the clue. And as a consequence to that, as a consequence of taking action, they end up basically in an environment, right? And by the way, a consequence could be good or bad, but in this situation, the consequence is that they end up in an environment, right? They go home and realize after doing research on the photos and information that Richard obtained that one of the men there is the grandfather of the DA mayor, if I go that route. Now again, see, I don't have all the details because we're just working on a story. It's all in the. So if that happens, right, that's the consequences. They find out something that connects the person who stonewalled them, which brings up the next thing. The protagonist's life changes direction because this information changes everything. Even though the reader or you or I might say, well, the DA's stonewalling or the mayor's stonewalling, they're involved, right? But the twist, which is not really a twist, but the turn of events is that the DA or the mayor is actually protecting their grandfather, but the DA mayor is not a part of the cabal. And that to me, and I want to make that very clear here. Clear that the DA is not involved with the cabal. They are protecting their grandfather, who is a part of it, but is not the boss or high level. And that's important to know because where do we discover the high level? That's right, the midpoint conflict. So when we get there, we learn because right now this is in writing. The midpoint conflict has to do many things, but one of it is reveal the lie or bring truth to the lie, right? And what that means is whatever the protagonist believed is challenged and turned on its. It's also known as a reversal. So everything they knew is now reversed. So, for example, if let's say let's say a character has a friend and the friend was murdered. So for the first half of the book up until the midpoint conflict, everything they're doing is based on their friend being murdered. Okay? Then in the midpoint they find out that their friend, or let's turn that around. I'm sorry. Let's turn it around. Their friend died. Okay, and everything seemed pretty normal, and they go through the whole book with their friend died and they're mourning their friend, and but then the midpoint is they find out that no, their friend was murdered, and not only was their friend murdered, but they were murdered by their father or mother or uncle or somebody else. Okay, and that uncle, father, or mother was like a second uncle, father, or mother to the protagonist, and they were always close. And but there's not enough evidence to prove the case, so that's what now they have to find a solution, going the descending fall from the midpoint conflict. So that's how it would work. So that midpoint conflict is a reversal, changes the information we know. So in this situation, we're feeding and seeding and fueling the idea that maybe the grandfather is indeed a high-ranking member of the cabal, or at least that's what the detective believes. That's their lie that they believe. The first lie that they also believe is that the mayor or DA is involved, which that will come to fruition by the end of the first act, that maybe they're not involved, but this person definitely is involved. All right. And those are some of the things we get to do, right? So, well, the detective is in. All right. So now the discovery of this has to create pressure, which means during the event, I have to do this. Someone that knows the detective is there at the event, and approaches Richard, asks what they are doing there, how's the job going, and it's been what, 5 years since I last saw you, huh? Now I get to think about that. If Richard has been a cop he's been a detective for 3 years, but he's been in a cop for 8 years, right? This means this person has seen them 5 years ago. Watch this. Now we get to play. Now we get to add another character that could potentially have some sort of movement in the story. This person went through boot camp with Richard and dropped out of the dropped quit. You could just say and quit being a cop under questionable stances. Oh my god, circumstances. Questionable circumstances. But was always a good person to the people around them. It's just maybe they were skimming, or uh, they were accused of beating their partner, their love interest, and it turned out wasn't, and the case was dismissed. The tension made them leave. Leave being a cop and joining the private sector or whatever. That's something I could work on, but cues. So there we go. So that's interesting. So we know that now this is important for me to know because I just added this and to not make this a crazy surprise, right? Someone, let's call them Frank. It's a Frank, New York. They're from New York. All right, so Frank. All right. So we want to go back up here. Uh, so something else I could do is the ex partner is at one of the crimes. I think I have it. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay. I don't know. Okay. Crime scene. Um, scene. Okay. Frank comes up in conversation, but isn't mentioned by name. However, the since three would have been through boot camp, there could be something about the case that seems familiar to the one that Frank was involved in as a cop. All right. I'm going to kind of like do this. Crime scene. Crime scenes. Now this is what I call seeding. If anyone's ever watched my videos, I call this seeding. We seed the plant, we water the plant, we water the seed, and then a plant grows out of it. So we don't have to say, "Hey, do you remember when Frank?" Blah, blah, blah. Right? But during a crime scene in my head, I could sit here and I could be like, imagine it going through the information, and Richard is like, something interesting about this. It seems familiar, and then the ex partner's like, "Oh, it's sort of like." Uh, that guy we went through boot camp with who didn't last that long. It only lasted a couple of years, and then Richard would be like, he could be like, oh, Frank something or other. I can't remember his name. Or he could say, oh. So Richard says, uh, you know, uh, involving That guy, friend, and then like the ex partner is like. This reminds me of that old case involving girlfriend. Right? Ex partner says, "Oh, you're talking about yeah, wife beater. Yeah, um, Kunari. Canary. Hey, Frank Canary, right? So now what's whatever, I could obviously work on that, but so it's like, hey, this reminds me of that case involving our old friend. Oh, you're talking about the wife beater. Yeah, Mr. Canary, right? Then we come back here, right? And Richard is talking to, where's Frank? Boot camp Frank. Okay, so someone calls Frank away by saying, Mr. Oh, being called um, by so and so, Mr. So what's nice about that is, just to make sure I spelled that right. Yeah. So in the beginning, the ordinary world, we set up the seed of there was this guy who was a wife beater, Mr. Canary, and then we are introduced to Mr. Canary as Frank in the scene. And then their moment is disrupted when someone says, "Oh, you're being called by sounds, whatever." We give the guy a name. They need you. They need you in the meeting room. Uh, your presence in the library, Mr. Canary. All right, Canary, right? So now that's an interesting reveal. And look, that's plot point 6. So at minimum, this is 6 chapters after we first introduce. Because remember, you can actually write each plot point could be a full chapter. Like that's the minimum amount. It's like you could you could throw that in there and really get a good solid story out of it. Especially if each chapter is 3,000 words, it's like 81,000 words. It's a quick book, right? But the story builds, but now we're getting more information. It's like, oh, Frank, that's the guy, Frank Canary. They said Mr. Canary, so now you're building on blocks and stuff like that. So that's how we get to do that. Anyway, so the consequences that of agreeing to continue to work on the case, he goes to a location. The consequence is that somebody he knows is there, which does what? Builds on pressure. How does it build on pressure? I love that question. But let's go over this real quick, okay? Before we get into that. Oh, an hour in. All right. So I'm only gonna do Act 1, and then we're gonna stop. All right. But anyway, so the protagonist's life. All right. So the protagonist's life changes direction. Has 3 plot points in it. Like every section has 3 plot points. And section 3 of Act 1 has plot points 7, 8, and 9. 7 is the protagonist's life changes as a result of the action they took and created, and that action creates pressure and stress. The first plot twist or pinch happens, and 9 is because of the twist, the protagonist is pushed into the new world. Now, just to be clear, a plot twist or a pinch, or I should say, a plot twist doesn't have to go dun dun dun, but this plot twist I could probably add here. Comes out that the DA or mayor is not involved. They are protecting their grandfather. Ooh, snap! Now that's interesting for close to the end of the first act, because we're going to be pushed into the second act with them trying to get evidence that the grandfather is the big bad. But it turns out in the midpoint conflict, they're not the big bad. Which, by the way, I can go all the way over here, right here, and I can kind of add that just so I know, because I'm going to stop it. The grandfather is revealed to not be the big bad, right? There you go. That's the great part about this short form outline. But let's go let's go into this. All right. So the protagonist's life changes as a result of the action they took and creates pressure. So pressure. This might be where I do the 3 strikes. This is strike 2. Richard wants to know where the first one was. Captain says that the DA or mayor, because again, we don't know. Don't know which way I want to go with that. Right? Warning you, warning me to warn you was strike 1. No. To warn you was strike 1. Warning. That's right. Warning. I know why. DA warning me. There it is. There it is. What? The DA warning. The DA warned me. You. That was strike 1. Whatever. All right. So, so the pressure is he's on strike 2, which means he has one more strike, which is if he continues down the path of trying to figure out something that is nothing, he will be suspended without pay. All right. So there's the pressure. The pressure is, hey, if you keep doing what you're going to do, I'm going to have to suspend you. I don't want to, but I'm going to have to. Right? So captain doesn't want to, but he's being pushed, or actually, they're being pushed to. And the other thing is, like, we could bring up that captain goes to Richard's house. So now we create something a little bit in the Richard's house, and says that he was visited by someone. You know, turns out it was the DA or mayor. Boop, 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 boop. And that you've been out at parties where you shouldn't be without an invitation, right? And then the whole thing. So now so how would the mayor or the DA know? Well, maybe he got seen, maybe he didn't, but we do know that Richard was talking to Frank, who was there. And how do we know Frank had any value at the thing? He was called to the library to speak. So those are the thread lines that lead there, right? So plot twist. All right. Richard knows he is close to something if They are making moves to push back. Is it push back or push back? Push back. Push back on him this hard. Richard makes a move to prove that the DA is dirty. 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 All right. Richard gets information or evidence proves that the DA is involved in something and he follows up on it. Something that evidence proves that the DA is involved, but he confronts the DA. Comes out that the DA is not involved, but they are protecting the grandfather. The DA is killed in their office or when they walk out of the office and get into the car. They are shot from behind, and a person goes running. Richard follows. Richard follows them. Okay. I would almost say this goes here because we're gonna find something out in the push, right? So because of the twist, the protagonist is pushed into the new world. So we're gonna finalize something in that plot point that is going to push them into, okay, I'm going into a brand new world. The world I thought I knew is no longer true. All right. So let's just read over this. So the plot twist is Richard knows he is close to something if they are making moves to push back on him hard. This actually... Then Richard makes a move to prove that the DA is dirty. Okay, so Richard gets information, evidence that proves that the DA is involved in something, and he follows up on it. The evidence proves that the DA is okay. Proves that the DA comes in. Boom. All right, and then the DA. This actually, again, the twist is that the DA is not involved, but that he was protecting his grandfather. And then the push into the new world is that the DA is killed, either in the office or when they walk out of the office, whatever it is. And Richard follows them. Now, I could do a couple of things here. Richard catches up to them, to the person. There is a shootout, which we can prove that Richard knows how to shoot. Okay. By the way, before when I said that thing about the gun, right? That's an example of a subplot, right? So we actually want to go back a little bit, right? We want a moment have a moment where Richard says something about a gun that the other detective says about the case, and Richard Bell gun knowledge. Okay, so that's the first scene. Like I said, we want to kind of move it along. Do 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 do. Right. Ding ding ding. Richard looks into the case. He finds another clue. Speaks to his partner. Let's do again. There's nothing in the first place. The captain's supposed to they want to establish something completely into the explore the details of the front door. The religious thing. Richard working on the main case. He's working on his death. Okay, so this will be interesting. So while he's working on his desk, he is taking his gun apart and cleaning it to help him think about the case. So we learn that now that's the second seed. Okay, well, he had knowledge about the gun. Now he's showing physical knowledge that he knows how to take the gun apart, clean it, and put it together. While thinking about the case, reading, thinking about reading the case files. So we're establishing that he has some sort of knowledge and understanding of the gun, both mentally first and now physically. And then when we get to here's something that's interesting. So when Frank says you got to go, we'll just have a fun moment here, a fun action beat, right? Security comes up to Frank, and Richard tells him that he has to leave. Oh no, I don't want to do something that aggressive there. I don't want to do something that aggressive. Like, why would they pull out their guns? But I guess you know what? Because there's a shootout. Richard is good with his gun and shoots to wound the man. Okay. I want Richard to use his brain to outgun the man and not just a bullet for bullet exchange, right? So he was be a little thinker. And then, he questions the guy and himself. Kills himself with a he kills himself. Cyanide. I don't know. That is not cyanide. What is cyanide? All right. The information that he did get out of him is something like going to get good people killed. Keep searching something your understanding. All right, so that's an interesting way to end. For me, I'm just for someone else to me, I'm like, this is bullshit. But just to kind of conclude, since we just did Act 1, it's ending on a question. It's vague but informative. We know that Richard is definitely onto something. Okay, something deep, something big. We learned that his first instinct of believing that the DA was involved was not true, and that the mayor, the DA's actual person of power, was his grandfather. Which then it turns out that person isn't even somebody high up on the totem pole. That their own people kill him, and then the guy that he catches says, "You're going to get good people killed if you keep searching for something beyond your understanding." So, are the people involved in the Kubal good? Are they trying to do something good? Are maybe he's saying, if you keep going, your friends will be killed. Maybe he's saying good people that don't know who they are or what their part in this whole thing is will be killed because of you, because we'll have to kill them. Meaning, like, maybe the grandfather didn't have to die, but because the detective is looking into it, it's causing an issue. Right? So there's a lot going on. It's like something something beyond your understanding. And we know that it has a religious element to it. We know that it has an old world element to it. And we know that there's a middle age, the Middle Ages value sets are there for that storyline. And what we did for Act 1 is not only did we set up the ordinary world, we set up the promise with it's going to be religious, there's going to be something interesting and old worldy about it. We have the noir element in there. We got the mystery and the thriller going on. Things like that. We had the inciting incident. We had a nice little twist already. And by the way, if anyone wants to know, plot point 8 in the 27 plot point outline is traditionally where the second act would start. But the way the 27 plot outline does, it lets the story breathe in Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and just spreads it out. Each act has 9 plot points in it, and that's the only reason I have that. A clubhouse room 2. First of all, thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate that. What's a clubhouse room? I'm gonna have to. What is the clubhouse room? What is a clubhouse room? I would love to do a clubhouse room. You can enter room as an audience member. If you want to talk, you raise your. Oh, that's rooms are often hosted by experts. Oh, all right. I will definitely look into that. This is pretty cool. It's on my to-do list. I just marked it. Michael, I really appreciate that. That was great. And thanks for the compliment. Next week, I'm going to do another live video. It won't be on how I write. It'll be another subject. However, the following week, I'm going to continue the How I Write My Novel series. I'm going to do it every other week so I can continue lessons. But we're gonna move on to either Act 2 or I'm just going to go into the next expanding version just so people could see how I kind of do it. Again, I did this from scratch, off the top of my head. I just had one quick little idea. If you missed the beginning, feel free to go back and watch kind of sort of what I've done. As always, please subscribe when and where you can. It'll be great. I would appreciate it deeply. And then, if you have questions, leave them in the comments below, especially after the video gets posted, which will be officially when I'm done. It'll be posted and not live anymore. And with that, thanks again, Mike. Thanks for the comments. I really appreciate you getting involved. I love questions during a session. With that said, hey, man, be good, be great. And as always, keep developing the right mindset. I'll see you next time. Thanks again, everybody. Love you.